You know, that's just the way it is, and it's no good being a tall poppy in this industry because they soon cut you down.
You're an electrician by trade, but I reckon you've got a PhD in greyhound training. Very mechanically minded. I've seen you turn shipping containers into kennel blocks, and you've been on hand to help out tracks from the maintenance you learnt when you had your own track. You've saved a few meetings over the years, Graham. I know a famous Hobart 1000 semi-final night, and many times at Geelong.
Yeah, I have, yeah, and Ballarat, yeah, I've naturally been an electrician. Electricians good tradesmen, they can just about do anything. So, and when I was an electrician, I used to make giant switchboards right from the drawings up. So, I know how to read drawings and do plans and do all that. So, it basically, I wired up the Geelong Hospital. I was in charge of that job there when it was the new wings were put on there. So, you have to be not only mechanically minded but electrically minded, and so to splice cables and that, yeah, it was, and of course over at Hobart when the guy had gone through unfortunately to mow the grass in the middle of the track, he hadn't put the rail back properly, and it was a Bramage lure, it was electrical lure, and the cables weren't aligning, and when he come flying around the corner, and you wouldn't believe it. There was the race after Menamel Prince. I think Menamel Prince broke the track record, and and there was the next race. So I was really glad at the time that it wasn't his race. So yeah, I've had to learn to do everything, and yeah, it's all just part of what you do as your love of the game, really.
You say you love of the game, and your status in the industry has found the authorities come to you for different studies, and you've conducted. You've always been on hand to speak at seminars and to other trainers, and you've conducted quite a number of studies on greyhounds to go forward for the stewards.
I have, yeah. You know, I used to get a lot of young people who used to want to learn to train dogs, and I used to take them through what I used to do, and we had a few sausage sizzles and talks, and I gave talks, and young people asked me questions, and to me a lot of things just seemed pretty basic and pretty plain, and it seemed like a lot of rubbish in a lot of ways, but to young people it was just made their days, and people used to write to me from all different states of Australia and overseas, and it basically it does give you a thrill, and I go to different places now and I bump into people, and they're always remain lifelong friends to me, and I think that's really important if what you're doing. As you said before, if you're going to be a tall poppy, you're sort of it's just not on in this game. So. And then, of course, later on, I did do a lot of studies with them when Bob McCurdy was the head steward, and I had my trial track at Lara at the time. He came and we gave different dogs drugs to see how long it stayed in their system, and we ran the dog, and then they tested them, and it basically was helping the industry as such, and to me it was a good experience for me watching what they did and how they did it, and it was all part of the industry.
Right, I want to talk to you about your darkest days in your career, and it was a terrible time for you when in 2002, after 30 odd years and many thousands of starters, a greyhound by the name of Mandrill Bale swabbed positive. Returned a positive swab at the Meadows to morphine. You were consequently given 18 months suspension and a $5,000 fine. You fought it very vigorously.
It was 7 o'clock in the morning, and I was underneath my water cart at the time. I'll never forget it. And I was cleaning out some of the water holes were blocked in the bottom of the water cart, and I saw all these feet come around the bottom of the tank, and they were all in suits, and there was about 5 of them, and Bill Nevane was the head steward at the time, and he said, "Graham, can you come out here? We want to have a talk to you." And so I slid out from under the truck, and here was all the suits there, and they said, "We've got a bit of a problem." I said, "What's the problem?" They said, "You've returned a positive swab to morphine, and we've got the police racing squad here," and he introduced me to the two guys, and the three stewards, which was Brian Williams was there as well, and Bill and an assistant steward, and they said to me, you've returned a positive swab to morphine, and what we want to do is we want to have a look through your kennels, through your fridges and that, and then when we finish with you, the police want to search your house. And so anyway, Beverly came over and said, "What's going on?" And I said, "We've returned a positive." Well, I can't describe the expletives that she said. So they searched my kennels, and at the time I used to get 600 loaves of bread a week, and because bread has always formed the main part of my diet, and so anyway, I had 600 loaves of bread in my cool room, all stacked in shelves, and so I opened up the front of the cool room, and they had a look in there, and the police racing squad fella said to me, "There's your problem." He looked straight at this different coloured packet on the bread. He said, "Your problem is in that bread." He said, "That bread's got poppy seeds in it, which show morphine." And I said, "What are you talking about?" You know, and he said, "There's your problem. That is the reason you've showed a positive swab." I went up before the inquiry, and they gave me a suspension of 18 months. Had to get off the property for 18 months because I wasn't allowed on the property, and I think it was $5,000 fine at the time, which was pretty devastating, and I was absolutely cut up about it. I worked out that for my defence I'd have to get a study done on it. So I rang up the Melbourne University at Werribee and spoke with a guy there in charge called Dr. Patrick Wright, and he said he could do a study on it. He said he would give me a price on the study, and it was $11,000. He gave me a price of 11 grand. And he said it will involve taking 7 dogs, all black dogs, from my property, and as such he would keep them at his place, and they would do a swab on the 7 of them, make sure that they had no drugs in their system, and then they would feed 4 of them one slice of poppy seed bread and the other 3 a slice of white bread, which he did in the study. And sure enough, the 4 that when he sent the 7 samples to the Racing Analytical Services, when he sent them there, they said, "Which ones did you give the poppy seed bread to?" And he said, "Hang on a minute." He said, "You tell me." He said, "You just do the swabs." So they'd done the swabs on the whole 7, and of course the 4 that had the one slice of bread all showed positive to morphine. So it was quite a shock to everyone, and anyway, I used that as my defence. Went to court. Cost me over $60,000, I think $63,000 to fight it, and went to court, and ended up that that they dropped it because the judge said that it was obviously where it had came from, but he said that I was negligent in feeding and that I should have had a vet's report on it before I fed it, which I couldn't believe. And he dropped it from 18 months to 3 months, and a $5,000 fine. It was actually a $10,000 fine, which was later rescinded to $5,000. And so I had to do the 3 months, and consequently I had to move off the property for the 3 months. And yeah, they were dark days. They were days where I was really very, how would you say it, peeved with the industry, because over the 38 years of training and never having a positive swab and having this happen to me, it was a bit of a shock. So I was really, quite upset about it at the time.
It did affect you in quite a way that you almost retired completely?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I took some time off, and naturally any person, whether it's a little trainer or not, any of them, they'll tell you when the stewards have knocked on your door and said you've returned a positive, it really shatters you, and when you know that you don't do anything wrong, and it shattered me, and I was pretty peeved with the whole thing, and I was sort of contemplating giving it away, but sort of the problem with greyhound racing is once it's in your blood and you do it, you're just very hard to give away.
You had a second swab again in the Melbourne Cup, cash up, swab positive. You had the samples analysed by your independent analytical people.
That was a case where I was in the heat of the Melbourne Cup with Cash Up, and she won the race, and naturally all trainers know if you win the race, they swab the whole 8 heat winners. So after the race I was swabbed, and then I was racing on the following Thursday, and on the Wednesday Brian Williams rang me up and said I'd returned a positive swab, and I nearly knocked me down. He said you'll be scratched from the Melbourne Cup, and of course it made big headlines in all the papers, but me being such a high-profile trainer, and made big headlines and on Sky Channel, and was really, really embarrassing. And because they said that I returned a positive swab, and that they were going to hold an inquiry, and at that inquiry I could have my own person there, of which from the previous Poppy case I already had a guy called Steve Corconillas, he used to work for Racing Analytical Services Limited, and then went out and started his own company. And of course I requested him to be at the opening of the second sample, and anyway he had to go there, and then he rang me up and straight after it, and he said, do you want the good news or the bad news? And I said, well, tell me the bad news first. He said, first of all, he said the B sample's positive. And I said, oh yeah. I said, and what's the good news? He said, so is the control. And I said, what do you mean the control's positive? He said, it's contaminated with the same substance that your swab's contaminated with. And I said, I was a bit bewildered. I couldn't sort of work out what he was telling me, and it ended up that the control sample that they wash all the bottles out and the ladle out with when you do the swab, it was contaminated with the same product that they'd since charged me with. So of course I was already scratched out of the Melbourne Cup, and I'd lost the $10,000 for winning the heat, and we went up before the inquiry, and the stewards basically said, we're sorry. That was it, we're sorry, we walk away. And I, after giving them a bit of a dressing down for 5 minutes and really venting my anger at them, and they just sat there and didn't say anything because they purely couldn't say anything, and I walked away from that. But unfortunately I'd had all the bad press and all the bad headlines, and it was a really, really bad situation.
After the break, Greame puts his disappointments behind him and shows Neil Brown his passion away from greyhounds.
Greame, what makes a good fisherman?
Oh well, I suppose when you grow up to it like I've grown up to with my dad, and